Hi, everybody. Welcome. It's Elizabeth Cronus McLaughlin. It's what day is it? It's the 5th of December, 2019. Very big day today in American history. We'll wait a minute to talk about that till everybody's on. But I'm very excited. Very happy. So are my children. And so I assume are all of you. So I want to spend a little bit of time this morning kind of talking about next steps and what we can expect from the next range of the process. But I'll give everybody a couple of minutes to log in by saying the following. We've had a really positive response to our upcoming 2020 program called Healing the Heroine. Quite a number of early registrations, really stoked about that. Some just incredible people have opted to join us in 2020 for this kind of deep dive into discovering the warrior woman within, including some people who are, at the top of their game professionally already. Like I sort of had, every time we run a program like this, I have in my head a list of the sort of like ideal participants, and two of them are already in. So we're really stoked. And I hope you'll all have a look at that. GaiaLeadershipProject.com/healing-the-heroine. Get all the details there. There's also scholarships and payment plans available for those of you who are interested in that. And just want to reiterate to all of you that it's a year-long program where we're going to be doing a lot of expert work and review and really working toward how we can make the biggest impact that we can and healing the stuff that has sort of held us back. So it's going to be a great year, and I'm really excited about it, and hope to see as many of you as possible on the inside of that. All right. So the big breaking news this morning, of course, the news that sort of has everybody really wound up, is that this morning at 9 a.m. East Coast time, Nancy Pelosi announced that she was instructing the House Judiciary Committee to proceed with articles of impeachment. This in particular is an extraordinary transitional moment in history. I'm sure that this is not a surprise to any of you who were watching live at the time. But obviously, top of the news this morning has to be that we are well on the way now. And for those of you who have been here since the beginning, I think it's the right moment for me to officially say, yes, we're there. We had a running joke on the broadcast, 2 years ago about Mom, are we there yet? Mom, are we there yet? Yeah, we're there. And it's great to be able to actually finally say that. There are going to be drafted articles of impeachment. Shortly after Pelosi's first press conference this morning, we'll get to the second one in a second. There was an announcement that there will be a hearing on Monday morning in front of House Judiciary where intelligence will be presenting evidence to support the articles of impeachment. The expectation there is that it will be Dan Goldman as counsel for the majority on House Intel, who did such a great job over the last few weeks in terms of questioning, and we'll also have, of course, counsel for the minority on House Intel presenting their version of events. All that said, there aren't going to be any big surprises coming in Monday's hearing. And the real question right now, and I encourage you to go back and watch yesterday's broadcast if you haven't watched it yet. The real question right now is going to be whether or not there will be more than the 4 articles of impeachment that were enumerated on yesterday's broadcast. So feel free to go back and watch that if you're curious. I will tell you there is one big key thing about this hearing on Monday that raised some eyebrows, and I don't want it to kind of be sort of shoved under the rug in light of some other things that have already happened this morning. The testimony that will be taken on Monday does not just include evidence of Ukraine. The hearing will also include evidence out of the Mueller investigation, including on issues of obstruction of justice. So the thing that sort of signals is that articles of impeachment with regard to Russia are still on the table. What the committee chooses to do about that is a question. But right now we do have an indication that at the bare minimum, they're going to consider evidence out of the Mueller report in deciding how they draft articles of impeachment. So of course, the expectation is that the 4 that I discussed yesterday will be included. Again, I'll just repeat what I said yesterday. There is a question about whether or not there will be multiple counts for obstruction of Congress and multiple counts for obstruction of justice, given that there are so many instances of this right now, from the context of witness intimidation to the refusal to comply with subpoenas, to the instruction to others to refuse to comply with subpoenas, that there could be multiple counts on each of those fronts. But there's quite a lot that could be included in those articles of impeachment. And now we know it could also include information from the Mueller report. So very dramatic developments this morning so far on this front. Really big day for history, huge. And it was a very sober statement that she gave early this morning. So, I watched it live with my kids. I was crying, sort of unavoidably crying. And my daughter was really excited. And so, we'll see what happens next. Now, a couple of you have asked about timetables. So let's just discuss that for a minute. Assuming that the evidence is accepted on Monday in this hearing that has now been scheduled before House Judiciary, there could be a vote on articles of impeachment as soon as next week. And indeed, the news this morning indicated that members of House Judiciary and their staff have been asked not to leave DC for the weekend. What that tells me is that they are engaged already. No surprises here. Again, I said this on yesterday's broadcast as well. They're engaged already in drafting articles of impeachment, and that would be perfectly normal and predictable at this point. So at this stage, we could have a vote in House Judiciary as soon as next week. That would bring us to the cusp of a vote in the full House before Christmas. And that would be a heck of a Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa present in my book. But again, we'll have to see how that timetable works. Now, I want to warn you all that there is a burgeoning Republican talking point about quote unquote delay. And we saw a little bit of this yesterday in the hearings yesterday, where there were requests to delay the hearing that took place yesterday until mid-December. One of the things that I want to just mention in this regard is that one of the things that procedurally I think a lot is just kind of going over a lot of people's heads, again, is the reminder that we can have consecutive articles of impeachment. So this idea that we should just wait and sweep it all up in one big thing, first of all, makes no strategic sense. It would make for an incredibly unwieldy impeachment trial. That's the first thing that I just want to say about it. I mean, from the standpoint of like having to try counts of impeachment for every single thing the president has ever done, that would be an incredibly difficult task. It's not something that would be impossible for a very seasoned prosecutor, but for the general public to consume, it would be a shit show. So the idea of proceeding on a narrow set of articles of impeachment now, at a moment in time where the general public has a grasp of what the allegations are, and a very clear one at that. I mean, I have to give Adam Schiff credit, as well as those who testified on behalf of the Democrats yesterday. It's quite obvious right now. We've had a master class in the law as of yesterday. We had master classes in terms of summations, as well as fact testimony in the last few weeks out of House Intelligence. We're very much in a place right now where the public is aware of what the allegations are, and they're very digestible in layperson's language. That's a good position to be in. And that, by the way, leads public support. There's a new poll this morning showing that 68% of the general public right now is disapproving of the way the president is running the country. Those, by the way, are very close to Nixon resignation date numbers. So, literally within the error margin, because I'll remind you all that Nixon was at 29% approval on the day that he resigned. So, if the president right now is at 32% approval, and we're not even on an impeachment vote cusp quite just yet, probably by next week, that's very significant. So, one of the things that's really key here, reminder again, I've been saying this for nearly 3 years now, impeachment is both a political and a legal process. And the political aspect of it does include the participation of the general public, the awareness of the general public, the push upon our representatives and our senators to make sure that that they do the right thing. And so all of this is kind of coming together in a nice, neat little package right now, and that's good. So I don't want anyone who watches this broadcast to take up this idea that somehow we need a delay. I'm also going to add, Neil Katyal made a very significant point on Twitter this morning, which is very relevant, namely that there is no double jeopardy on impeachment trials. So one of the things that means is that if the president is tried here and he is not convicted on these counts, there is nothing that would prevent a future Senate on trying him again on the same set of counts. Now, the only thing that's very dangerous about that particular approach is it assumes that the Senate will flip in 2020 and the president will be reelected, because that's really the only scenario in which it would make sense to retry the president on the same counts. So I sit in the place at the moment of thinking that faster is far better. And the other thing that I will just say here is that the Republicans are a mess. As of this morning, and last night, I mean, there were like word salad press conferences last night that made no sense from people like Louis Gohmert. There is a transitional moment happening right now in the trajectory toward the removal of this president that is not small. And the pressure needs to continue and the timetable needs to continue. And one of the reasons why the Republicans want to slow it down is because they can't seem to get their shit together. And I don't personally, I'm not invested or interested in giving them time to try to do that. To me, the really significant point here right now is that we have a distinct set of facts, a very clear-cut set of crimes, very easily identifiable articles of impeachment that are understood by the general public, that have been explained in probably the most ideal way that they could be from a trial perspective, with facts, summation, law, like all the pieces are coming together right now. So there's no reason to not move ahead. And let me add, for those who are worried about the president, quote unquote, getting away with other types of crimes, I will remind you all that if he happens to be removed, he can be prosecuted. So, and if not, there can be, again, rolling articles of impeachment. So there's no justification at the moment for delay, like literally none, no strategic one, no legal one, no court of public opinion one. It's time to push forward as quickly as possible. All right. A couple of other things that I just want to say about the nature of a trial in front of the Senate. So those of you who watched the broadcast a couple of weeks ago, when I went through the process by which the prosecutors are nominated from the House, those folks then move over to the Senate to try the president, et cetera, will remember that we had a conversation at that time about the role of Chief Justice Roberts in overseeing an impeachment trial. And again, I want to remind all of you, because there's been like a little bit of like bitterness and cynicism on the feed this morning, which I have tried to shut down a little bit, that the scenario with regard to subpoenas is very different in an impeachment trial than it is here. Because Chief Justice Roberts will be sitting in the role of a judge. That means that if, for instance, there is a subpoena that is issued for someone to testify and they don't show up at the impeachment trial, the Chief Justice is empowered to do the same kinds of things, presumably, that a federal court judge would do to make that happen. And that includes, by the way, fines and sanctions and throwing someone in jail until they testify and all the other things that go along with that. It will be a much quicker and faster process, start to finish, on subpoenas in the Senate. One other thing, however, that you all need to be aware of is, of course, that because subpoenas to appear are for a date certain, there will have to be a new whole set of subpoenas issued for purposes of a Senate impeachment trial. Again, that's very standard stuff. There's nothing about this that is going to be difficult or weird. Those subpoenas are going to issue. They will issue, from the prosecution, and also, by the way, from the defense. Assuming that the president hires defense attorneys who are going to stand up and defend him for purposes of an impeachment trial, they will be able to subpoena witnesses as well. Now, what happens if, for instance, the president's defense lawyers subpoena Hunter Biden? Well, the prosecution will make an objection to the relevancy of that witness, and the Chief Justice will rule on whether or not the subpoena should be quashed. Again, those of you who have been watching for the last year and a half know the process by which subpoenas can be quashed. If the subpoena seeks irrelevant information or evidence, if it seeks the testimony of an irrelevant witness, those issues will be briefed. There will be a ruling from the judge. Sometimes they don't even need to be briefed. Sometimes they're just ruled upon from the bench. These were, when I tried cases, that was how it often happened at pretrial conferences. There were just like baseline decisions that certain things were relevant and certain things weren't. And nonetheless, from the viewpoint of where we sit right now, my expectation is that the process with regard to subpoenas of witnesses will move very, very, very quickly. And it will not be a scenario where the disregarding of subpoenas will be viewed very favorably by the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. So I just want to make this really clear. Someone suggested this morning on the feed, and this is absolutely inaccurate, and I want to make it really clear why it's important that we don't say stuff like this. Someone suggested this morning on the feed that, if Adam Schiff is subpoenaed to testify, he can just defy that subpoena and not show up because that's what Mick Mulvaney has done. That's not true. And indeed, the reality of where we are right now is that if Adam Schiff were to be subpoenaed by the defense in an impeachment trial, there would be briefing before Chief Justice Roberts on this issue. There would be oral argument on the floor of the Senate about whether or not it was relevant to have Adam Schiff come and testify on the floor of the Senate. And a ruling would be issued in that regard. But if Adam Schiff defies a subpoena in the same way that Mick Mulvaney has defied a subpoena to testify before Congress, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court will kick his ass. So, I want to make it really clear because it feels really important to say this right now. if you are finding yourself in a position of being cynical and bitter about what's going to happen on the floor of the Senate, I beg you to not put out false information about what is going to happen next. If you want to be cynical and bitter, I'm fine with that. But please make sure you understand the process of what's going to happen in a Senate impeachment trial before you go out there and claim to supply information that is actually false. One of the reasons why this is so important right now is because, and again, this is a key mindset position as well as a legal and political position. One of the things that I want to remind you all of is that this is not a done deal yet, right? I know that there are commentators out there this morning who are like throwing in the towel, the kind of conservative, there's a few never Trumpers out there who are on that bent this morning. So let me just say this. We have no idea what's going to happen from the trajectory of public opinion, polling, pressure inside the GOP, from the standpoint of a GOP senator coming out and cracking the wall. We have no idea what's going to happen between now and the opening of an impeachment trial, let alone the end of it. And this is not a moment in time, let alone in American history, to be assuming that it's all written in stone already, because I can guarantee you it's not. I will remind you all that when it came to Nixon's resignation, it was within a very short window of time, like a matter of days, between the Supreme Court ruling that the tapes had to be disclosed, the GOP recognizing that they didn't have a leg to stand on, certain members of the GOP deciding that they would vote in favor of the impeachment of Richard Nixon, and then a coalition of, like a dozen GOP members going to the president and saying, it's done, you need to resign. All of that happened in the space of like a week. So anyone who is out there at the moment saying that this is all a done deal already, that it's all a waste of time, that, he's going to get acquitted on the floor of the Senate and everything will go back to the way it was, literally doesn't know what they're talking about. Not only are they not looking at history, they're also not operating with an understanding of where we find ourselves right now and how fast the pieces are moving, right? Like, reminder here, I just want to make this really clear. The impeachment of Bill Clinton took 70 days. 100 or so from the moment where the impeachment proceedings started to the acquittal. All right. We are now in a position where the impeachment process for Donald Trump has only taken like 72 days, I think it was, as of yesterday. So, again, reminder, like, we've been waiting for this for a very long time. And those of us who have been really committed to fighting for our democracy have been doing this work for a very long time. This actual process has gone quite quickly. We have gone from Nancy Pelosi saying that she wasn't in favor of impeachment and she would never do it, to giving a press conference this morning, ordering articles of impeachment to be drafted in the House in the space of 70 some odd days. So, to me, one of the things that just has to be clear right now is that we have to continue putting it out there that there is a possibility that he will actually be removed or resign. Because, by the way, there is. And, again, if you cannot envision it, if you cannot see it, if you cannot get motivated to work toward it or motivate others to work toward it, please at least consider that the rest of us are motivated and interested in doing that. If I'm just going to say this, like, you put your cynicism and your bitterness out there on social media, the only effect of that is going to be to make other people stay home on the couch and not make their phone calls. So you can decide how invested you are in saving our democracy. If you're not invested in saving it, that's fine. You can sit at home and be happy living under fascism. And the rest of us are going to sit here and fight for what we think is right. And I am just going to tell you that I see a number of paths right now toward the end of this particular administration regime that are dependent on certain types of dominoes falling. And there are places right now where points of pressure can be applied that will make that more likely than not to happen. I will just remind you all that, we are seeing plenty of indications at this moment in time that things are flipping, even in some of the aspects of Trump's base that have been considered to be, undeniably in his favor. The fact, again, that this poll this morning says that 68% of the American public thinks they're worse off under Trump than better, that is information that the GOP is going to look at and take very seriously. And there is an understanding now, based on recent elections, that even the usual traditional red states are not stable. There becomes a moment where self-preservation does become more important to at least some of these people, not the hardcore culties, but some of these people, than supporting this president. And it's not at this moment in time, this is the irony of this, is that it's not actually going to take that much for some of these people to start to break. So, we have to be very mindful about the fact that we're all connected, and that every pebble that we drop in the pond is a ripple, and that we all are in control collectively of the destiny of what happens in this country coming next. And we have to believe that, because, by the way, it's true. So I just want to encourage all of you who are, out there, who are maybe worried about what's going to happen in the Senate, to, at the bare minimum, keep your minds open, and at the best, to put out there that he actually could be removed, right? Because it's possible. I mean, again, I just want to remind you all, it wouldn't take that much. We're talking 20 people. That's not a huge volume of senators. And there's already lists that have been circulating on our, feed and elsewhere, of the people who are most likely to bend and break. And, we had 3 senators this week come out already just 2 days ago against the president's position that Ukraine had somehow interfered in the 2016 election. There are strong indications that in the Senate, which, by the way, I will just remind you all, this hasn't been said very frequently on this broadcast, but it's worth noting. The Senate is a much more augur institution, a much more serious institution than the House. And senators serve for 6 years. The folks who are in the Senate, historically at least, are the ones who take the law quite seriously. So, again, we're going to see pressure. We're going to see various people start to take differing positions. And the question then becomes, what are we going to do about that? All right. So that's that for this point. I just want to say that, I again, on the basis of what Neil Katyal said this morning, it's not a bad idea either, when you make your phone calls to these moderate Republicans, to remind them that the president can be retried on the floor of the Senate, and that we will take back the Senate and do it if he is reelected. So one way or another, they're all going to be screwed. I mean, that's the other thing that I think is a really important point to make. If they don't vote in favor of impeachment, they'll be voted out of office. And then if he gets reelected, we'll impeach him anyway. That is a really clear-cut argument to make in the phone calls that you make to moderate senators today. All right. A few final points on the hearing yesterday, because I just want to, I was asked a lot of questions about Turley and all of this. So, as I discussed yesterday, Turley taught at my law school when I was there. I knew him personally, sat in on one of his classes before I even decided I was going to go there. He was a very young professor at the time. There were things about yesterday afternoon's testimony in particular after the broadcast that shocked me, like overt misstatements of the law by Turley. Also, some pretty plain indications that he had not reviewed Sondland's testimony, and nonetheless, the biggest point that the Republicans were able to score with him was the idea that there should be more investigation, not less. And as I said yesterday, the only thing that kind of confirms at this point is that an obstruction count in an article of impeachment is necessary, because subpoenas did issue, people were instructed not to comply with them. So, he did make this very strange statement yesterday that he'd seen no evidence of a quid pro quo. Sondland testified that there was a quid pro quo, so I don't know what universe Turley was living in when he said that. It makes no sense. Either he was completely unprepared, or he's just at this point a partisan hack, which is profoundly disappointing, but quite possible. And that was that, and we had, on the flip side, 3 incredibly accomplished, nationally recognized legal experts out of the best law schools in the nation, testifying as to the president's direct violations of law and crimes, and the history of the impeachment clause, and the reasons why current statutes don't necessarily apply to those, constitutional bribery, for instance, being one example, and giving a whole slew of very clear examples of why the actions of this president are impeachable and removable. One of the witnesses yesterday said, if this isn't impeachable, nothing is. So, yesterday's hearing was an important piece of the puzzle. In fact, one of the 3 biggest pieces of the puzzle that we need. And at this stage of the game, I feel pretty confident about the messaging of the Democrats. There was a fair amount of discussion yesterday by the pundits that even the Democrats didn't expect yesterday's hearing to be as compelling as it was. It was very compelling. It was a baseline education, law school education on constitutional law vis-a-vis the impeachment clause. And, the general public needed that. We'll proceed from here. So, it's a very good day. I don't want to knock it. It's a very good day. And our obligation now is to really keep up the pressure as quickly and as powerfully as possible. And I will just add, reminder to everyone that because the Republicans have no defenses, because they have not asserted any affirmative defenses, as we would call them. That's a term of art in the law, to the president's conduct. The only thing that they have at this moment are shiny objects. So that includes things like Professor Carlin mentioning Barron Trump's name. That's literally all she did yesterday, right? Like mentioning his name in a congressional hearing. It includes things like a reporter from Sinclair Broadcasting going to Nancy Pelosi this morning and asking her if she hates Donald Trump, which, by the way, created a moment for the history books about the fact that she doesn't hate anyone. And this is a question for the Constitution. We're going to continue to see those sort of like provocations, sliming, straw man arguments, fabrication of shiny object points to try to distract. Stay focused on the issues. Okay. So that's like the best advice I have right now. The president has committed impeachable offenses. There is no dispute. There's no legitimate dispute about that in the facts or in the law after what we saw yesterday. The door has closed on that particular argument. There will still, of course, be testimony on the floor of the Senate. There will still, of course, be witnesses called and challenges to some of those witnesses and cross-examination and everything else, assuming that the president doesn't resign. But at this moment in time, there is no legitimate defense to anything that the president has done. And that means that when we get to the floor of the Senate, he's going to have a very rough time. Because the other thing that I will just let you all know is that it's not like Chief Justice Roberts is going to let them spin these crazy, insane conspiracy theories about CrowdStrike on the floor of the Senate. There are very specific rules that apply in courtroom trials, and assuming that those rules apply on the floor of the Senate, we have no reason to expect that they won't. That kind of bullshit is not going to get a hearing. And so one of the things that means is that the president is going to be left in a position where like he's basically going to be, metaphorically naked when it comes to any form of defense. And, again, one of the law professors said yesterday that, and this is correct, that if he is acquitted for this conduct, we're not living in a democracy. So the question I pose to all of you right now is like, how hard are you willing to fight? Right. It feels like that's a good place to kind of like wind down for today. Make your phone calls, please. Call people like Cory Gardner, who, by the way, apparently made some comments in the cloakroom yesterday to the effect that, the Ukraine idea was a load of horseshit. Please make sure that you are calling, people like Mitt Romney. Make sure that you are calling, the folks John Thune, who came out and, questioned the president's, theory on Ukraine as well. Make sure that you are putting pressure on the senators who are going to be the jury. They are there to do the job of the American people. They're not there to put party over country. And at this point, country over party needs to be a mantra that we are repeating as often as humanly possible. All right, that's it for today. I will see you all tomorrow. Many thanks to all of you for your excitement and your energy and everything else that goes along with that. Reminder, our program for 2020, Healing the Heroine, is now open for registration. If you are interested in doing a very deep dive into healing ancestry and present trauma and figuring out how to really your voice and your gifts to make a massive difference in 2020, we would love to have you join us. We have a great group of women already registered for this program, and men and non-binary folks are also welcome, I should mention, because this is really about diving deep into the heroic feminine energy within all of us. You can find all the information about that program at GaiaLeadershipProject.com/healing-the-heroine. Okay. Thanks so much, everybody. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.